go?
Yeah.
There you go?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dustin Gahn. This is the Alternative Highs podcast. And today is my first time interviewing somebody. This guy I met at the Y through his sons. And he's got these two just amazing kids. And I've been asking about their dad because you always sit there and wonder. I don't want to be that weird dude, but this is Stacy Burke. Stacy's a doctor, a trader,
Yeah. My professional background was I trained as a chiropractor in St. Louis and practiced for 25 years. And probably 20 years ago, got involved in other opportunities and kind of transitioned. We were living in Australia for a number of years. So,
when did you do? Was it in Australia? We've had this conversation, so I'm gonna try and like pick a few of the parts that were like, because the first time we met, we spent 2 hours in the gym on the floor talking, and I've never done that in the gym in my life. It was one of the coolest things. It was the most captivating. Like, you need a book written. But so you're in Australia. What brought you to Australia?
uh, I studied in St. Louis, and when I graduated, I was in a situation where I had a long-term opportunity in the U.S. or in Canada. And I had a friend who was in Australia who we went to university together. And the opportunity in '98 was to go there for a couple of years, which I weighed up and thought this is probably the right time to go. I wasn't married, and it was 2-year adventure that turned into 20 plus years. So it was Perth was it was a special place to live. Great lifestyle, great people, and just one thing turned into the next, and before you knew it, it was 20 some years later.
Is it in all the kids born?
The boys were born in Australia. My daughter was born in Canada, but went there at 1 month old.
Okay. So are the kids like considered like Australian citizenship?
Yes, yeah, we're all Australian citizens.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to make that return. So the when did, and this is like a funny way to ask this, but when did the Ironman dream come in? Was that in?
Funny enough, it actually started in Australia, but not at that time. I went over traveling in 1988 with a close friend of mine, and I'd always been into fitness and sport. And I was in a news shop and saw the Ironman edition of Triathlete magazine, which at that time was mainly about Hawaii. There was only a couple of races, and I just came back from there and said, that's what I want to do. And just started. I mean, I'd always, ridden and stuff, but not at a level that, a serious level. And I just bought a bike, and, I lived here in Chatham and trained at the old Wheels pool.
And how many kilometers a day did you?
Well,
did you have it all broken up?
Back then it was a learn by trial by error. I would just go out and ride and run and swim.
Whatever you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I built it up. Obviously, I did at that time was the Royal LePage Triathlon Series. So I started off with Olympic distance and just started doing races every weekend all over Ontario. And the goal, you had to qualify for Hawaii. And I was ignorance is bliss when you don't know and you're willing to just train and do stuff. So my goal the first year was to do the half Ironman, which was in Aurelia. So every year the race schedule was the same, and it culminated up with a half Ironman in Aurelia. And so it was a weekend, and it was great. And, I never looked back. I loved it. And, at that time, nobody here was into that. So, I was a football, hockey player, and people were like, what are you doing? And I just keep,
Well, anything new
Well, and
people
the
have a hard time wrapping
traffic
their head
wasn't
around.
bad here. I mean, I used to ride on the Bear Line and out Pinehurst and out to the lake. No,
Yeah.
the traffic wasn't an issue, and there'd be the odd person, they'd kind of beep their horn and stuff. But
Nobody likes to cyclist.
yeah, so 1991, I qualified, or I signed up for the Canadian Ironman, and I met a guy at university who we had the same shirt on, same triathlon shirt. So we started talking and we started training together at university. And that following August, I did the Canadian Ironman. And that was my first experience in Penticton. And it was phenomenal, it was not so much the race itself, but the people, the event. And the funny thing about that sport is the more you go to races, the more you meet the same people, and you start to make friendships with them. And eventually, I ended up in St. Louis as a result of an injury, and that was one of the greatest experiences for me because I met a group of young guys who I'm still very close friends with, who we all were trying to go to Hawaii, and there was. A couple of them were state swimmers, a couple of them were elite cyclists. And then, there's a few other guys who are just, hard in the head and trained hard all the time. Yeah. So it was a great group. And
what was the injury that brought you to St. Louis?
I woke up one morning after the Around the Bay run in Hamilton is a 30K race that I would do end of March every year with some friends of mine who were at McMaster. So we'd go down and they'd have a keg party the night before, which is the stupidest thing to do before a race. But they're close friends, and it's at the end of March, and every year there'd be a big one last winter blast, and it was always that weekend. So we'd have warm weather, then we'd get to Hamilton, and there'd be like a snowstorm, and you'd have to run around the bay. It's a 30-kilometer race. It's the oldest race in North America, and it's 2 weeks before. One week before the Boston Marathon, 1 or 2 weeks before the Boston Marathon. And so we would do this every year. And the last year when I was graduating, I did that race and came back. And the next day, my knee felt a bit stiff. I'd never had any injuries all the years of hockey and football, and other than bruises and stuff. I never had any broken ankle, but But I woke up, my knee was stiff, and gradually over a few days, I started to notice there was a small bump on it, and I just thought, well, maybe I'm just noticing that now because it's bothering me. But the bump continued to grow, and my knee stayed stiff to the point where I ended up seeing specialists. They did bone scans and MRIs. They thought I had some other more serious issues, but it found out I had a bipartite patella, which is a patella that is actually in two fused bones. Instead of just one bone, it's two. And I assumed at the time that I must have fractured it as a kid playing hockey or when I was young, and complained about knee pain, and eventually it healed, but it healed and funny enough, which I just found this out, a certain small percentage of people are born with that, which I didn't think I was, but Lachlan had to get an MRI because of his knee, and my son, and he has the same
interesting.
Same side, same knee, and only less than 10% of the population get it, so it's almost
freaky. But he was like right back in the gym. I see him, we were working out together. I walked in because it was my first day back with my cane, and he said something. It's like my first time in 560 days, and man, the kid just like he's like, that's really cool. Like, he's just both your boys so well.
They're good kids.
They are great. So you end up in St. Louis.
I had to have surgery, and the surgery, I graduated, and I was at a point where I was trying to decide that, I wanted to continue my studies. I just wasn't sure which direction. I considered applying to medical school at the time, but I knew I would have to go back and probably apply a couple of times to get in. I didn't want to do academics. I wasn't interested in pursuing, a master's or an honors. I didn't want to teach. And I had a friend who was down in St. Louis studying at the time from Chatham. And I just thought, hey, I was seeing the chiropractor here. I'd seen him since I was a kid, a couple of them. And I just started investigating that more. And it just the more and more I looked at it, I thought this was a perfect melding of a philosophy, a wellness health philosophy about performance and well-being, and melding it with my interests in physiology and fitness.
Figuring that all out during an injury.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't, it was a big decision. It was a big commitment from my parents. Obviously, for me to go down to the U.S. was an expensive venture, but I had a great situation. This friend of ours really helped me get settled. The school was amazing. The university was extremely, inviting for Canadians. They really went out of their way to, and it was honestly, St. Louis was awesome. 5 of the best years of my life were spent there, and still very, and again, still very close. I don't see them regularly, but I have some very close friends that came out of that time there. And I went to Hawaii twice as a result. I credit being in St. Louis with getting to Hawaii.
Don't skip the Hawaii thing. Hawaii's like that's the big deal for Ironman.
Yeah.
So how many years did that take you to get first?
My first Hawaii Ironman was in 1995, and so again you have to qualify, and there's a series of races that you can go to qualify, and of course. For each age group, there's only 2 or 3 spots, and you're always competing against the same guys, right? Yeah. But once they get one, you either get one yourself. So if I place third or second and beat somebody else out, but I've already qualified, and it rolls down to that person if they decide to go. And again, the guys that I was training with, they were elite, like just fantastic, but hardcore. We trained together a lot.
And that pushed.
Oh yeah. Like we would meet on certain weekends.
Were you on that level until then, or
I was close. We were all around the same level. Like again, a couple of them were state swimmers. So Tom Lombardo. Oh yeah, and again, some of my class, some of my school colleagues. Different years, but other Canadians. One of my closest friends at the time was a national swimmer here in Canada.
Okay.
And he missed the Olympic trials in butterfly. As he was coming over, the other person's hand hit the wall. It was that fast. So he trained. He was getting married, and the deal was he's a great big guy, looks like Tom Hanks, and he said, "I'm gonna train with you Monday to Friday. I've written up a program, and then on the weekends I'm going to party." Yeah. So I said, perfect. And his training with me in the pool took me from, my first Ironman back in California was 54 minutes out of the water from over 70. So I shaved off over 16 minutes.
Holy.
And now I was starting to really push. My strength at the time was probably cycling. So I was always I suppose that I always prided myself on being able to run the marathon coming off the bike, just not walking and running the whole thing, but training down there really brought me to another level. And
I don't know, I'll cut you off. Which one of the 2 Hawaii Ironmans was the hardest one for you to get to?
The first one. The first one took me 3. I had to do 2 Ironmans. I'd already done it. There's races in the States. So one of the greatest races that's early summer is the Springfield. I don't know if they still have it. Iron Horse in Springfield, Illinois. It's not quite a half. So it's 10-mile run, 90-mile bike, and I think 1.2-mile swim. So it's really hot. It's one of the hottest races, and the problem is because it's mixed distance, everybody goes super hard. Yeah. So it's a tough race because it's like literally it's the early season qualifier. Yeah. So you can qualify there. So some guys go there and they qualify right off the bat. They're not as strong maybe at the longer distance, but they're stronger at that distance.
Yeah, seems like a pretty good one to jump on.
Yeah, and it's a great, like, all these races back in the 80s and or mid 90s were, there's a big party after. Like, there's music, there's,
A bunch of like-minded
and you've
people
just
coming
trained, yeah, and
together.
you've just
It's
done
a
a
really
race,
great
right?
time.
So, and there's, and back, that's back when you used to get a big race kit full of gear and everything. But the hardest one was definitely the first one, because that's, again, I said ignorance is bliss. You know that you're right there, but you still, you're constantly just at the cusp of cracking it. And what happened was I went to all the races in the summer, went to California, and I did not have a great race. I went with another close friend of mine. He qualified and actually he won his age category, and it was a great race. Napa Valley. The swim was in a beautiful river. Through the cycle was all through the wine region, but it was super hot, and I didn't qualify. And so I thought I was going to qualify there. This was in July. I got home, phoned Ironman Canada. The races fill up a year in advance, and I called and made a bit of a white lie and said that the race director had told me to keep calling, because if there was a cancellation, she would put me into the race. And on the spot, on that phone call, the woman said, "I just got off the phone with somebody that canceled. If you've got your credit card, I'll put you into the slot." And she did it right then and there. But the problem was the race is only in a couple weeks. So I just come back from California. The race is in 2 weeks. I've got to fly from St. Louis to flew to Washington with the two other friends of mine. We drove up from Washington to Penticton, rented a car, and I got fourth place. I was, just come off of an Ironman. I had a great race. I ran 9 hours 55 minutes, which, under 10 is pretty quick.
Yeah.
For age group at the time, it was pretty quick, and that's a tough course in Canada. The old original course was all through the mountains and great course. But what happened was, so I didn't qualify. I was fourth. There was 3 spots. Came home for the 2-week break back to Chatham. And I went up to Collingwood. I was signed up to do a half Ironman in Collingwood. It was the end of season race. And all my friends were going to come up and watch the race. I was bummed out because I didn't qualify, but I was like, it is what it is. And we were staying overnight in London. And I went out for a jog the night before the race and stepped on a rock and rolled my ankle. So all my friends were coming up to watch me do this race, and I did the first. It was a 2-lap lake swim in Lake Huron. I came out of the first lap. I couldn't even run down the beach. So they decided to get some cold beverages and just watch the rest of the race. But what happened was I came home after the weekend and was at my parents' house, and the phone rang. And parents said, "Oh, yes, he's actually here right now." And they handed me the phone, and I was like, "Well, no, how does anybody know that I'm here other than my friends?" And it was the race director from Canada, and one of the people had already qualified in the first 3, who were the same 3 guys I'm always racing against. Yep. And she said, "Do you still want to go to Hawaii?" So I actually got the roll down spot my first year. And so now, thinking the season's ended, I'm now got to book. I got to book a trip to Hawaii, and it was within 3 Ironmans in the 10th week. It was a 3 race Ironmans within a 10-week span. So that was the hardest one, but also the greatest, because all those years, you're always just thinking about getting to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of sitting there thinking, I'm actually going,
Yeah, man.
So
I got chills just thinking about it when we talk about that.
Yeah. It was a great, as I said, back then around here, none of my friends were really into it. My dad, my parents supported me, but didn't really understand. They'd never seen a race. Not for lack of wanting to, just that back, he was on the weekends, and my parents were working. They were just working all the time.
Yeah.
And so I went to Hawaii. I've got to tell you this part because this is the best part. So I go to Hawaii, and the night before the race, I get a phone call. So we're in Hawaii. We're driving all over these places that we've seen for years. I used to, my roommates from Guelph, my housemates would tell you, I would go to the library back in the VHS. We'd record it. It would be on TV every year because we didn't have, satellite TV and all that stuff. So once, a month or so later after the race, they would always show it on NBC Wild World of Sports. So I'd record it, and I had all the years of the races, and I'd go into the library and just sit there and watch the races over and over again. And part of that was I suppose I was building muscle memory that, when you're out training for that long, people used to say to me, "What are you thinking about it?" So I'm not really thinking. I'm doing the race.
Yeah.
And my dad called me and said, he said, "What time's the race?" I thought that's kind of strange. He wasn't a really big, I suppose, didn't really understand why I wanted to do this race. But I said, I don't know, we got to be down there at the pier. Everything's checked in. And we had to be down there, I think, around 6:30. The race started at 6:30. We had to be down there at 5:30. So he's saying, "Oh, okay, well, what time is that in Hawaii?" And, he was asking me these questions. And I have to go back for a second and just tell you, after I finished my first Ironman, I called my dad. I was so excited. I'm with my close friend, who's from Ottawa, and his parents flew out to watch him do the race. Same thing, his dad's a surgeon. And my poor friend finished about an hour behind me. And his parents said to him, "What happened?" And so he's gone from this moment where he's, I'm waiting for him at the finish line, and we're celebrating like we just had the best week.
Yeah.
And his parents come up to him and say, "What happened?" So immediately, I go back to my hotel room, and he's back there 10 minutes later, just, doesn't want anything to do with his family, right? So my dad says to me in Hawaii, he's like, I called my dad, and my dad said, "That's great. Just make sure you're back on time Monday to be at work," because I worked for my father. So I was kind of like, so we're both kind of, let's go get some beers and have a good time. But, nobody understood. And I, you don't expect them to. But so fast forward to 1995, my dad says to me, "What time is the race?" And, he's asking me some questions, and he said, "Okay, well, good luck. Have a great race." And I said, "Thanks, Dad." Hang the phone up. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and or I'm just, I said, "That's really strange. My dad is asking me." Just wasn't like my dad to call randomly and ask questions like that. So the race starts in Hawaii the next morning. And of course, at that point, you get to Hawaii, and people will tell you, you can easily add an hour onto your time in Hawaii. And I always, again, ignorance is bliss. I trained, I prepared. There was no lacking of preparation. I did not shy away from making sure that I was fully prepared for all the, the time in St. Louis. Like, I never was underprepared. If anything, was overdone from all the mileage. But so when you get there, you have to. I used to have a little prayer that I would say before a race like that. Just thanks to the Creator. Just want to hopefully have a great day. No mechanical issues. I'm grateful to be here, and all the glory goes to everybody here. And your first objective, of course, is to get out of the water, because in those days there's no separating groups. Now they separate the pros, they separate the men, they separate the women. Well, those days it's like you kind of an honor system. You seated yourself where, if you're not fast, you shouldn't be seating at the front because you're going to get in the way and you're going to get swam over. But my objective always was, I trained really hard to be able to stay in somebody's current. So meaning that I let them cut the water, and I would, not with the super fast, but I could stay on the hip of the fast swimmers, and that pulls you. So I knew I was going to be 4 or 5 minutes off the very top group, but I was going to get out of the water in around 50, 52, 53 minutes, which is great. Because in Hawaii, there's trade winds that come onto the coast mid-morning. So if you're not a strong swimmer or you're not a strong cyclist, you will ride into a headwind in both directions, which is why people will end up all of a sudden blowing up on the bike, and then they're midday and in the strongest heat of the day once they start the run. But I came out of the water, and all I could hear was this voice yelling, "Go, Stacy, go!" And it was my father. So he
stuck down to watch it.
He flew all night, and at that time, my father had never even been off the continent. And he flew all night, got there in time for the race to start. He saw the start while we were in the water, and he met up with my girlfriend at the time, and he was there for the day, and flew back the next day.
One day just to why?
He flew.
That's a
and of course now,
the coolest thing ever. Dad son moment.
We have a great photograph after you finish. So just to give you some insight, I had a great day in terms of, my time was a little bit slower, but not much. Generally speaking, I had a fantastic, a good ride, not a great ride, but no mechanical problems, no flat tires, nothing like that. And the run was, at that time, I was just happy. Hawaii's the reward.
Yep.
And they take you afterwards. You get massage, fluids, if you need any medical treatment, whatever. But then you get your medal, your shirts, and they take pictures of whoever you want with you on the podium. So of course I got pictures with, my girlfriend at the time and my dad and the two of us. But there's a great photo of my dad and I. And I tell that story every year on Father's Day because, for him to have done that, and again, not understanding, didn't need to understand.
No.
And knowing my father, he never took a holiday really until he was in his 50s. And my father did not have the type of life that I had growing up. So for him to have done that, to me, was pretty special. So, and still is.
It's one of the most.
I get emotional because my father was such a generous man, and from what he, I guess, started with, to how I had the type of life that I had, and for him to do that was a pretty special thing for me, and again, for him to be there to see it. Like Hawaii's, it's everything that you think it's going to be. You always think that once you cross the finish line, you're going to have the secrets, the keys to the universe, just by doing the Ironman.
Yeah.
But what happens is that the keys to the universe come in the process. What it takes. And I tell my sons this all the time. Anybody can show up on game day, and you know this yourself. It's the day in and day out that people don't see. And Dan, I'm sure, same thing. All the years he played football, and the willingness to show up and get out of bed. Like that sport is a very lonely sport, because 90% of the training that you do is going to be on your own. And again, I didn't know any different, so I just did it. I just trained because I knew I had to do that, and I couldn't be signed up or to go to an event like that and not be fully prepared.
How many years did you spend in training from get-go to your last Ironman?
So my last Ironman was in '96. The next year I went back.
Yep.
So, the funny thing is, the hardest one to get to is the first one. For me, 10% of athletes, they're going to naturally find their sport and they'll excel. And some will then tap into the work ethic and the commitment. Other ones have the ability, they just don't do the work. And 90% of the other people it's just training, learning, being smarter. But once you've been there, knowing what you like, so taking all the garbage mileage I did for years and then really understanding what quality was. Swimmers already understand that because they learn that in the pool. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, training has gotten a lot smarter. Track athletes understand it. Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is all the things that hurt the most: intervals, track work, computer training on bike. Those are the things that pay the biggest dividends. All the things that hurt the most pay the biggest dividends.
Yeah.
One of the current world elites is a guy from Windsor who trains indoors. Yep. He comes with a interesting history that got him into the sport. But he broke the record in Hawaii. Broke the world record in Hawaii, I'm pretty sure, and finished second.
Come on.
No. So,
what's the hardest part in the training by yourself, and what brought you through it? And because of that moment we had about you and your dad, I'm going to share something really quickly because I asked your boys. Yeah. Oh. So, what would be the hardest part?
The hardest part of the training or the racing?
The training.
The hardest part of the training. I don't know. I don't see, part of it I think is none of it's hard. Okay. Because it's hard as
something that you want.
Well, yeah, so there's days when you don't want to train. And I always say that you can do something every day. You have to get smart though about what you do, because your body needs rest. You can't. So when I was young, when I first started, I would just go out and run on, around the city. And of course I got Achilles tendonitis and, knee, just because you're running on concrete all the time.
I've met some people with these problems and they don't seem, it's funny when you meet somebody that can fight through something and work hard for it and know what they want, because I've seen it through that way when you want to, have a little sob story for yourself, and it's just a pouty fest, but it's proven that you can work through it and you can.
Yeah, I think, see, nowadays we have the internet, but in those days we had books, right? We read. And so I was always reading. I always was reading something, whether it was in a magazine or in a book or listening to, something that, I always believed that people were, I'm not unique, right? They're all doing the same thing. They're all training. So it's me that needs to get out the door today.
Yeah.
And, it's easy. If you miss a day, it's easy to miss 2 days. It's easy to miss 3 days. So I think one of the most powerful things that I probably did was I kept a log of all my workouts. And I used to do it always a month in advance. So I do like a week, 4 weeks on a page. So then I could see all the workouts. And I could see that I'm getting closer to where the first race was or the second race was. And, there's some great stories too. Like, there's so many great books, reads, like now we got, Goggins, and there was an excellent book written by a guy in Australia called The Pat Farmer Story. And this guy ran, 100 milers, but he never ran. He wasn't a runner. He just started running. He saw
Just
this.
decided to become a long distance.
Yeah, and he's quite well known now because he's ran pole to pole and all that, and they've done documentaries on him. But the human, well, and the other thing I wanted to know, I was obsessed with these endurance. They used to have the Race Across America, and again, in those days, it was pretty simple. You had to have a support van. You had to sleep, I think, 3 hours a day, and they just started the race in California and ended in New York or whatever, right? So I was like, I wanted to do that. I just couldn't get enough.
Runners are just a different
breed
of human because
I have zero interest in that now. Funny enough, like I always said at 50, I wanted to go back to Hawaii because I wanted my kids. They would be old enough that I wanted them to see Ironman. And I don't care if whatever they do, I didn't care. I just wanted them to have the memory of seeing that and it be an imprint, because I believe that, sport, the gym, training, and this is what happened in Australia. No matter where you go in the world, it connects you with people right away who have the same interests, that are healthy. And I brought a bike when I went to Australia the second time. And within 6 months, I had a close, a circle of 40 people that I got to know really well, roughly, and made some close friends that lasted me the entire time I was in Australia, just because of the cycling community there that grew enormously. Like one of the young kids from Perth, 2 years ago, won the Tour of Italy. Like, it's just an incredible community. It's a very healthy place.
Cycling community is such a difficult thing to penetrate. I've been cycling.
It's different there because it's the climate, the culture, the coffee culture, and a lot. And it, Australia is a fairly big. It's probably because of the weather.
Yeah.
All over Australia, the cycling is big. Now it's gotten a little harder the last few years because traffic's increased and there's been more road rage incidents, and the number of cyclists has grown. But it was, again, another area where I made some very close friends, continued to do a fairly, above average level of riding, and did Chris, my wife, was doing some cycling racing and triathlons and running. Yeah, it was a really healthy place to live. And so the last time I did a Hawaii was 96, but I continued to ride and do half Ironmans and just
still training.
Yeah, like I wasn't.
I see you in the gym.
Oh yeah. Like
the first time I saw you, you're doing push-ups, and I was sitting there. I was like, "Is this guy gonna stop?"
Well, now I'm 50. I'll be 56 this year. I don't want to be out on the bike like 5 hours riding. I'd have zero, if I work out in the gym 45 minutes to an hour, I'm older, I want to try and maintain some muscle. I still run a couple times a week. I ride my bike, to the gym and stuff. I don't do a lot of riding. I swim at the lake. My parents live on the lake. So I just try to, I just.
You look good. I didn't think you were 56.
Yeah, I mean, I love being healthy, and I think it's imprinted into my kids now. My boys do their own thing. They train all the time on their own.
Yeah,
my daughter's at the gym.
And your daughter too.
Yeah, and she was a swimmer.
Over your daughter,
yep.
She's
a swimmer.
swimmer.
She's taken a few years where she's just kind of maybe deciding how committed she wants to stay with it. And I understand at this point. Yeah, because the great thing about swimming is that because she learned it so young, and all the boys, I'm trying to encourage them to get back into it for part of their football and everything else. Yeah. Because you can always go back that when you know how to swim. In Australia, they obviously grew up swimming constantly and being in the ocean. But I think that no matter what you go through in life, if you have an appreciation for your health, and whether you go through ups, downs, good times, bad times, it's always a magnet. It can always bring you back. And one of the most valuable pieces of advice that I was ever given by another close friend of mine was never make a decision when you're down, when you're beat down, when you've gone through a tough patch, when you haven't been maybe at your healthiest. Make a decision when you're at your healthiest and you're on top of things. and major decisions should only be made when you're at your best,
Mm-hmm.
because you'll make the wrong ones when you're at your worst. And you'll have a much clearer perspective. Hopefully you're not over elated, or, when you're healthy and you're around healthy people, and you're maintaining that, you tend to make better choices, better decisions.
It's proven itself with you.
Yeah,
you seem like the the picture I see of dad, husband, dude in the gym, and like the way the boys describe you. Me and your dad are going to do a podcast tomorrow. What's the coolest thing about your dad? Coolest thing about my dad is he knows exactly what he's working for and why he's working for it. He's got his priorities straight and knows what it takes to be at the top. I tease the guy a bit here and there just to remind him he's got 2 sons, that no matter what, he knows what he's got behind him. Coolest thing. He just continues to work harder and harder every day, gives us every opportunity imaginable. I thought that was a pretty fucking cool response for a kid to think about their dad at that age. Because I'm trying to think, my kid's just a couple years older. Does my kid think like that? No.
I think, at their age, at 18, I don't think anybody appreciates, like, when you get to that age, you're always butting heads. Part of the reason I went to university was I wanted to show my dad I could be better or do better,
mm-hmm.
achieve more. And also at that time, it was the thing to do. It wasn't expensive to go to Canadian universities. And, you got to go away and have some fun, right? And all my friends were going. But you look back and realize all your parents, in majority of cases, all they really want is obviously for you to be happy.
Yeah.
But, I tell my kids this all the time. I made a lot of bad decisions in retrospect. And I've always tried to encourage them to do different things. And of course, it's always a hard argument, nature versus nurture, because you see the same things repeating themselves.
It's one of the funniest things to do, especially I do things a little bit different. You and my dad would get along great. I went about things differently. So I have a naturally different relationship. Jody and you are the same person. The day I get to introduce you guys, you two will become instant friends. But he's got boys, and I know I sit there and his boys, your boys. I'm like, listen, guys, there's some things that I can promise you that's not the pathway. And
exactly.
I like that the boys all are. It's a much different time. Like I make myself accessible, especially to a friend.
Yeah.
It's like, ask me that weird question that you can't really ask dad. Like I'll give you the dad answer.
Yeah.
And respect dad at the same time. But I really enjoy getting those messages from whatever one of my friends' kids are asking. It's always like, man, like if these are the problems, like these guys got it made in the shade. Because I went over. I was trying to think. I got arrested over 1,000 times. Like, my old man and my mom were. Guess we gotta call them. And I to this day I'm like, I'm like, oh God, like I feel terrible for them, because it just was so natural, and I just didn't even have a care in the world. Like, who else do you call?
Yeah.
We won't go into that. So there's one other major thing I really want to ask you, because like I said, I don't want to go crazy Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast. I'm not that. I'm just not that guy. How from doctor to stock trade? When did that transition come, and how long? Like every time I talk to your boys, I'm like, your old man is just so humble. He won't even.
Well, what happened was I grew up in an environment, family business, and as I said, I went to university, and continued my studies. But I was always, I suppose, entrepreneurial oriented. I wanted to, like everything, I'm just looking at achieving what I felt was potential. And I had an interest in the markets from a young age. Didn't know much about them, but I'd read books and followed the stock market a bit.
You're pretty data driven on.
Yeah, I just. But what happened was I went to. Well, number one, I was in practice. I liked practice. Chiropractic was an amazing profession, and that's how I ended up in Australia. But I also recognized the limitations of being in the office all day, and also in terms of income, what at some point you can only see so many patients, and there's other ways. Obviously, you can invest, you can get into property, you can do different things. But I recognized also I had an injury, and this really kind of tuned me into the fact that if I couldn't go into the office, and I can't see patients, that's a problem because I can't earn any money. And I'd gone to a seminar at that time, which was based on trading futures. And the instructor that I met on this Friday night, I went and did the weekend seminar with this gentleman who was one of the best teachers still to this day that I've ever had. A gentleman named Brian Costello, who had written several books under a pen name. And I got to know him over a 6-7 year period intermittently, and learned just such an immense amount. But from that first Friday night, I walked out of that room and said, why hasn't anybody ever shown me this before? It was just about how simple models could be applied to the market, and how you could earn a second income from that. Now that started off a very long, painful journey because as I tell people now, we had a very simple program to follow. There was 2 basic models to follow. It was all end of day. It was hand-drawn charts. I did everything by hand, and I was obsessed with it. I spent every moment, and my wife will tell you that for 20 some years, very rarely did I ever go a day without studying the charts and trying to figure out something, So what happened was, my very first trade, I still remember this. In those days, you called your broker, you gave him your orders. So I entered what they call OCO orders. You put a market, it was this futures contract. And what happened is that if it hit that price that filled it, and you had a stop loss order, and we went down, got a coffee, went down to the beach, and my phone rang about 40 minutes later, and he said, okay, it got executed and it hit your take profit. And I made about $750 in 40 minutes, which in 1999, 98, 99, was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I made it in 40 minutes, and I thought, wow, this is,
There's a lot of money today.
Well, yeah. Well, you know what I mean? I figured it out. I'm going to make $1 million.
Yeah.
And so, of course, then I started to do everything else too. I didn't follow this is a whole nother conversation, but I deviated off what I'd been taught, and started trying to trade all the time and doing things. And so I was up and down, up and down, up and down. And then I was trying to trade shorter time frames. And, now fast forward probably almost 25 years later, it took me 15 years to really, I suppose, have a very solid grasp of what was actually going on in the markets, in multiple different types of markets. It took me another 5 years to actually recognize all the flaws that I was reproducing over and over again in terms of bad behavior. Just impulsive trading, over leveraging.
Habitual.
It's everything. I considered myself, obviously, and you would too, a very disciplined highly disciplined person.
Mm-hmm.
And I have done every single thing under the sun that I never thought I would ever do in trading, good and bad, and more bad probably than good. But when you recognize that, and you actually have, so taking what works, the Bruce Lee philosophy, eliminating out everything that doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
or that puts you into situations that causes self-sabotaging behavior. So for example, if you're an alcoholic, then don't put yourself into an environment where you're going to be around alcohol. So if you're an impulsive trader, or if you are like I'm not if I've been to a casino twice in my life, and both of them just been walkthroughs. I've never placed a bet. I'm not into that. But there are so many things there's a book called The Hour of Dog and Wolf, and it's all about.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's all about what happens when you get into a fight-flight state when you're at the screen. And so this, a process of calling out all these things and then understanding, like, there's days when it's really easy to make a lot of money. And so then the question becomes, well, why don't you just trade when you have those setups on those days? Well, you
have a system that you run, that you do.
Yeah.
And it's like
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are very specific to the behaviors in the markets each week. And
I've been checking out your videos.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing you never mentioned either. Friggin' YouTube star.
Well,
78,000 followers.
Yeah. So what happened with that is this close friend of mine in Australia who was from Canada, we got talking one time, and there's a famous trader who started a program called The Turtles named Richard Dennis. And he said you could publish all the rules in the newspaper and people still wouldn't follow them. Yeah. And so we had a little bit of they had a bet. Him and one of his colleagues had $1 bet that he said you could train anybody to become a trader. And the other one said, no, you can't. It's intuitive, it's instinctive, it's training. And so the Turtles became very famous because a portion of that group went on to become very successful hedge fund managers and fund managers, and some of them are still active today. So we had a bit of a joke, saying you could tell people that exactly what you're learning and what you're doing, and they still won't listen. And so I started the channel, and
How long have you had the channel?
Probably 10 years. About 9 or 10 years.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah, obviously I've evolved, because every day, like anything, you learn something. Mm-hmm. And the most important, like the last 10 years, has really been pretty much focused on managing myself. The models that I trade are the same over and over and over again.
It doesn't matter what you're trading.
That's it. I follow a basket of instruments,
and I love that.
That I can sort of navigate based on what I know about, certain markets, and they reproduce the same behaviors, and I just look for those behaviors weekly, 2 or 3 times, and outside of that, I've got another close colleague in New Jersey who we talk every day. Because of the same things. We call it scar tissue. Scar tissue is things that we've been through as a result of all the bad things. Mm-hmm. Some very bad scar tissue. Yeah. I got together with a group of traders in Australia. I got taken away to Penfolds Winery for a weekend with this other group of traders who were clients of this company. They took 12 of us to Penfolds, and the scar tissue stories.
Yeah. Well, it's
frightening.
Financing. You're dealing with life.
Yeah, people have done. You just never think, which is partly why you do things that can destroy your life, and because it involves money.
If you were to give one piece of advice if somebody was thinking about wanting to get into trading,
Well, interesting you ask because my sons obviously want to learn. That's a tough question because one of the
Is it
reasons.
based on criteria of the human?
Well, partly, but you can't really appreciate so. If I give you a set of rules, if I give my son a set of rules, there's two sides to the coin. One is don't read or do anything. Don't read anything about trading unless it's maybe Market Wizards, which talks a lot about just behavior psychology, and it's all subtly mentioned in passing in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've tried to do with my sons is tell them about, because I don't want to teach them anything about the markets. I just want them to understand you only make money when you trade on the days that it's easy to make money, and these are the types of days, how they present, how the criteria that build into that day, and it's pretty simple. I always joke if you can count to three and tell time.
That you teach on your channel too.
Yeah.
What's your channel name?
Just under my own name, Stacy Burke Trading.
Stacy Burke Trading.
So, because what happens with a lot of people, you will not respect the simplicity of simple money making trading setups until you potentially have done a lot of scar tissue damage.
Yeah.
Because, and
everything in life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fall to the floor
if you've been put to the sword, and I'll say this, and I talk about it in my videos. I did it over and over and over again, repeatedly, and I can't explain. I understand, like it's no different than drugs or alcohol. It's not an addiction. People will argue that those things are, but I can also say that when a human being snaps their fingers and makes a decision, they can switch that off instantly when they've gone far enough to the point where they have had enough. And not everybody's going to do that.
No.
But the person who can do that, so I have rules about how much time I'm at the screen, because I know based on what happens in the markets, once a certain timing window kicks in, it's no longer volume that's driving the market, it's algorithms. Okay. And quantitative trading, and that's designed to do things to get people into the markets, keep trading, not let you out without a loss, or it's
similarities in life.
Yeah, it's
fall through.
I always say to people it's rigged, and the point being is that because it is rigged, you can profit off of that significantly if you can manage yourself and not do things in between that will damage all the good things that you can do.
So it's pretty impressive.
It's a hard thing to do, because even when you know what not to do, so like today is perfect timing, because I don't really allow myself on the screen in the afternoon, which is partly why I do the mindset videos, and I'll do a technical video at a different time. But today is an FOMC day, which is the Fed. So the Fed comes on. It's a non-farm payrolls Friday. Those are two of the biggest economic releases on the calendar on a monthly basis, on the same week, on this particular week, not every month, but this particular week. And so the behavior of the markets is driven from Monday morning into these news releases to trap traders and everything else. People will try to trade the volatility. It'll destroy their trading account. Some people will get lucky. I call that getting rewarded for bad behavior. There are ways to trade that, but you don't need to do that. Sure. There's other easier, simple ways without stress, without being at the edge of your seat.
You've had a mentor. Your gentleman that brought you in New Jersey?
No, he's a colleague of mine. We talk every day.
No, you went to the seminar. Sorry.
No, that was in Sydney. So that was.
Do you mentor anybody other than?
I
70.
Yeah, like I give everything away on there. I've written a playbook. I'm in the process of actually redoing a second version that's very specific for Lachlan and Aiden if he chooses.
Yeah.
And
Justin, if he asks. The
point being is that those models are very, very specific to the template on the day, and you only need to have one or two of those show up out of a basket of 20 in a week, and they're what I call scalable. So scalables are, there's no limit to how much size you can put on them, and there's the reason why those are scalables is because they're being driven by institutional volume driving them, and they're and so when you understand that that's how real money is made, and then just taking that, not holding it, not holding the till next week or anything else. It might be 3 hours because it could like so. Yeah, like, well, so there's certain days that go to the close because they're reversing the market or they're expanding the market. And those are the days that you can significantly compound your account because there's a reason why they're not coming back. And then there's other days where they'll go back and forth on both sides of the range, which are not the days. There are trades within that, like, I trade New York, so that's the end of the day for Asia, London, New York, and then on a Friday, that's the end of the week. So when they lock that in and they're not coming back on certain opportunities, and those are key setups if they present, in any instrument that traders can. So, but most traders want to trade every day because they treat it like a job. They want to go to work and get paid. My attitude is I would rather take 1 or 2 trades with a lot of size or more size rather than sit there and try to trade all day and on 50-50 opportunities. I want to go when the market is 99 to 1 and in my favor. So
you put a lot of work into it, and it's.
I've spent my life on this.
You make it sound really easy. But it comes with 25
Look, I used to get really excited about it, and I talk about it all the time. And now, like my sons want to learn, and the part of the dilemma is that one of the key understandings that I have is that often without scar tissue you can't learn. Like pain is a great teacher, and so if I gave them $1,000 to start trading with, it doesn't mean anything if they lose it. But if they work and take $1,000 or
their own money,
and they lose it, at their age, it still may not have a lot of meaning. But if they value a dollar, I always use this expression, and again, my colleague in New Jersey, like, it took me a long time to really appreciate the value of a dollar because I've dealt with numbers that like I've done some really stupid things. And
I can relate.
Well, look, I know I'm not alone. It's just one of those things that you can't change the past. But the great thing about the markets is because they're leveraged. The markets that I trade are leveraged. You can, no matter how big of mistakes an individual has made or continues to make, if they learn to manage themselves and they have simple, easy money-making setups, and they can prevent themselves from doing sabotaging behaviors, they can earn that back, whatever they've lost, times 100. Because the same things happen every single week.
Just a template.
It's all just a template.
This one really
the month is a template because we have a calendar of news. Like Canada releases its interest rate announcement, so the Canadian dollar will, and then there's GDP, there's CPI, there's the Fed for the U.S. Like, there's certain ones that are major movers for each individual country. So those like, so for example, last night, 9:30 our time, which is in Australia, the early morning, they had their CPI release, which was an explosive move. Well, oftentimes those explosive moves are traps for the end of the day, which we saw in New York. It collapsed back down, and that was an easy opportunity from the high of the week for traders to be shorting it or selling it and buying it back before the Fed release came out. Just, so they use the calendar often to shift the market, trap people on the wrong side, and then do things that they, slowly Other times they do it violently.
Yeah.
But I only want to be in the market when it's about to explode.
Yep.
Or collapse.
Talking to you about it I'm fascinated. I'm gonna pick your brain on it more.
Absolutely.
I want if I can jump in with the boys and get
sure.
the 10.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm really culling it down, partly because I suppose for the boys, but I've had other people who have reached out, and obviously when you get to a certain point, people recognize that what you're saying is the truth, because there's a lot of crap on the internet. There's no rocket science. There's hidden potholes and landmines that people aren't aware of. They think that it's like, hey, if I watch you trade today, that's all I need to do.
Can I do it tomorrow myself?
Yeah. And
people are wild.
They don't understand that 99% of it, like there's a lot of just simple, easy trade setups.
You can't get lucky.
Yeah. The most important thing that people don't understand and they will not recognize is that they are a human train wreck when they get to the keyboard.
Yeah.
They're random, they're impulsive, they're emotional, they become irrational. But the funny thing is they'll do it over and over again.
Yeah.
And then they'll go spend the weekend going over their charts, their rules, what they're going to do next week. And it only takes they'll do things right maybe for 3 months.
Yeah.
And in one day undo everything in a span of an hour or two.
It's the circle of life. Everywhere
there's a lot of things. Yeah. Like it is a day-to-day journey. I always use the expression 1% better every day. Because you can learn something every single day from not only from the market, you learn something every single day.
I remember you saying that.
But as your life, I like my boys, my daughter, they're great kids, but they'll tell you they see
success.
Well, no, but you see what you show them.
Yep.
So part of me going to the gym every day is because that's when it's imprinted into you. Eventually, you have an impression of what you want to be like. So I try to conduct myself, and I've again not been perfect. I've had to. Working on yourself is a continuous thing, because what you show them is what they see.
Yep.
So how I speak to them, how I present myself, how I behave, and I'm always talking to myself at the screen. So you have to be an observer of your own behavior, because you have to, when you're going through this process of cleaning your act up on the screen, you have to be observe. So you're running a trading business, and if you were working for a firm, like people always want to go work for a trading hedge fund, or they want to go work for a prop firm, and I always laugh about that, because they think that they're going to learn how to trade there. Now, they'll give you some simple maybe methods to look for things. You might learn from other traders there. But unless you're making them money, you won't have a job, right? So you don't work for a hedge fund unless you're making them money.
And a lot of it.
Yeah. So unless you start making money really quick, and what they don't recognize, though, is that most of them are desperate. In a lot of cases, they do damage. They get desperate.
That's what happens when you don't have the funding.
Bingo.
I was trying to explain this the other day.
Yeah, and in the U.S.,
get desperate.
The leverage isn't the same.
That's when people will rob, steal, do strange.
Don't make decisions when you're on the downside.
And I like that. And I think at this point, I'm going to wrap it up, because we've done over an hour.
Oh, good.
We could do a fucking 6 hours, but I really do appreciate you.
Absolutely. No, I got, obviously, if you open up the can, I'll talk. So.
Fuck, I love it. The last thing
Thank you for having me.
80 said was he loves to talk. But
certain things I can keep talking about. So appreciate you having me.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You too, bud. Thank you.